1, 2.
Good afternoon. I'm First Alert Meteorologist Diane Phillips, joined by...
I'm meteorologist Kyle Gillette, and we've got some exciting stuff today.
Yes, everybody is talking about it. We have the total solar eclipse coming up on Monday. You and I have been talking about this for months.
Yeah, it's something that we don't get very often, and we won't get very often after this point. So when it happens, it's exciting.
Yes, and that's why we're taking the next little bit to talk about this event, because it's going to be a while if you miss this eclipse for us to either catch it or see another eclipse that's going to be coming in. And we want to make sure that you're prepared. You know what's going to happen, and if you're going to be traveling, we're going to be talking about that. There's also the mention of pets in our show this afternoon. As far as an introduction, we want to make sure everybody's able to join us. So if you're looking to find the coverage or you want to have your family and friends join us here this afternoon, we are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube. We have Roku, Fire TV, Apple TV. We have Android TV going. And as far as a replay as well, because I know 2 o'clock, there's still kids in school today.
Absolutely.
We're at work, so you're probably at work too. So if you want to replay this, or if you're worried, oh, I couldn't make it there at 2 o'clock, don't worry. We're going to have this again. You'll be able to catch back up on Facebook. We're also going to have that on YouTube. And also on our website, WNEM.com. There's a lot of folks streaming there. And we're also going to have a web article. So make sure you're searching our website. We're going to have all of that. Plus, questions and comments.
Yes, coming up on towards the end of the show, we'll be looking through all the comments that we get. If you're joining us on YouTube or Facebook, we'll be looking through those comments and we'll be able to answer any questions that you have. But again, we'll do that at the end. So if you have questions, send them, but we won't be able to get to them right away. We'll handle that at the end of the show.
Right, because we have a lot of things that are planned out in the show, so we may answer questions as we go. I know a lot of people are asking questions on pets, glasses, there's so many things. So let's get started here. Why wait any longer? I'm sure there's a lot of people who have joined in and they just want to know what's going to be going on with the eclipse.
Yes, so it's very fascinating, both from an astronomy standpoint, but also the impacts that we see here on the ground. And so when we're talking about the eclipse, of course, there's the pictures that everybody sees, but what's actually happening? It's very fun.
Yes, so we are going to turn it over to First Alert Meteorologist Matthew Mondro. He's going to have a look at what an eclipse is.
On Monday, April 8th, we're looking ahead to the Great American Eclipse, one that's going to be very close to mid-Michigan, too, at least with the totality of that eclipse. Just want to go over really the anatomy of a solar eclipse, what exactly is happening here. So here we have it, the sun, the earth, the moon, all revolving and rotating around as it normally does 365 days out of the year. You have the moon that's rotating a little bit faster around the earth there as it goes around the sun. One thing to note there, this is not exactly to scale, but still we do, or rather are able to see how exactly this works. So you have the moon, and that goes in between the sun and the earth. That's what the solar eclipse is, because the eclipse is from the perspective of earth. So here we're seeing the sun being blocked out because of the moon going right in between. Because of the distance and the size difference of the sun farther away from the moon, you're going to have a partial shadow. That's called the penumbra. And then you have the full shadow. That's called the umbra. That's going to be a little bit smaller than that partial shadow. So the umbra, or full shadow, is what we're calling totality. That's expected to move right through Toledo. That's going to be the closest spot to mid-Michigan where we actually have totality. But even here in mid-Michigan, we're really going to be right on the edge of that umbra and penumbra, with around 95 up to about 96 or 97% coverage between Saginaw and Flint. So here skies are still going to get darker, not exactly full totality, but we're still pretty much right on the edge of that penumbra and the umbra. And while we're talking about eclipses, just want to visit a lunar eclipse real quick too. Really, it's the same sort of concept here. It's just the sun and the moon are flipped around. So this time now, the Earth is actually in between the moon and the sun. So that's why when we have those lunar eclipses, sometimes the moon actually does brighten up or turn red or orange sometimes. So again, really the same idea here, just more so it's you have the Earth in between the moon and the sun for a lunar eclipse. But here with that total solar eclipse, again, moon is between the sun and the Earth, and that's where we're seeing that shadow casted down right onto Earth.
Thank you, Matt. Pretty interesting there. And I think it was great to go over the difference between a solar and lunar eclipse, because some happen, it seems a little, like the lunar, always seems to happen a little more frequently than the solars do.
Right, and just because of how the Earth and the Moon are aligned with each other with the Sun leading up to a solar eclipse, we actually just had a lunar eclipse a couple of weeks ago. Almost every time we have a total solar eclipse, there will be a lunar eclipse within a couple of weeks on either side. So we actually just had that a few nights ago. I believe it was cloudy here, typically. Of course, we're talking a lot about the forecast, but that's coming up a little bit later.
Yes, because I know a lot of people have a lot of questions on the forecast.
Yes.
But you may be wondering, what am I going to see here in mid-Michigan? So I want to kind of talk about the path and what we can expect here locally for us. You are going to find that here's our map of the United States. So everybody in the continental United States, we're talking all 48 states, and everybody is going to experience this eclipse one way or another. Now, everybody I know is really excited about the path of totality, which you can see is going to be traveling from Texas and then across to over into Maine and then out across Canada. And then expanding out from those lines, you're still going to have some coverage of the moon. The moon is going to be able to block out 80, 60, 40, and even 20% for our friends that are out into Washington. So we are going to be seeing everybody. I'm sure you can anticipate on social media, seeing friends, people posting. Hopefully they have solar filters on those cameras. We will talk about that. But I do also want to kind of go into some of the towns that we are expecting to see here across the United States. There's been a lot of contests and travel plans for Texas. So as the moon is going to come in line with the sun, you are going to find that it is going to start in Texas. So locations like San Antonio, Austin, and Waco, these are some bigger towns. San Antonio, though, looks to be right there on the edge. So if you're in San Antonio, you may be at like 99% coverage. You might have just a little bit of light coming there. And even the time for totality in Austin is going to be pretty limited. If you're in Waco, you can see that's a little bit better. Fort Worth, Dallas area, also big populations there. So a lot of people not having to travel, the eclipse coming to them. And we are going to find that this is going to continue off towards Arkansas. So Texarkana, Hot Springs, Little Rock is another big one. But look at Pine Bluff, out of the area. So I bet the highway there is going to be pretty busy with folks that are going to be trying to travel in to get into that line of totality. I know that's a big goal for a lot of people. They want to experience that darkness of totality. Jonesboro is in there. Memphis is not included. So I anticipate folks traveling from Memphis to come in. And look at St. Louis, also out of the line of totality. It looks like we missed a lot of bigger cities coming across the plains, but Paducah is in there, Evansville is in there, but Louisville is not. So that's another big hub where the eclipse is just going to miss it, but it's not going to be a very long drive. That's the beauty of this, is that this path isn't going to be a long drive for many people to be able to experience it. So Bloomington, Indianapolis, and Muncie. Now we're getting closer to some locations that we can travel to. So those are all big cities that are going to be in the path of totality. And Ohio is also going to be pretty popular. So Dayton, Springfield is in it. Columbus is not, but very much a drivable time frame to get to the path of totality. I anticipate a lot of people from Michigan are going to make it, because in Toledo, they are in it. So think about it. I know meteorologist Matthew Monder is going to talk about it, but for Flint to Toledo, we're talking less than a 2-hour drive to get to totality. So that is great to get there. And then, of course, you have a lot of rural land out into Ohio. So great viewing for us. So for folks who are traveling, it's a car drive away to actually be in totality. You'll find that Cleveland, Akron are both in there. And check out Lake Erie. They're also going to be in the line of totality. So I bet there's going to be people, there's no ice out on Lake Erie. I bet there's going to be people who are going to have their boats out and enjoying it. I would, if I could. We will find that Youngstown is not into the path, but we do have Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse. If you're headed further east, Lake Ontario might be a decent spot. We'll check in with Kyle to see kind of how those clouds are going to look as we go east. But Syracuse, Watertown, Burlington, as we head off towards that northeast corner of the country, still totality is carrying on. And this is going to be in that line where we're talking at max about 4 minutes, leading out towards about a minute, maybe even 30 seconds of totality. But maybe Maine, you want to go and travel there, still going to be experiencing the eclipse, and that's going to continue to head off into New Brunswick in Canada. As far as locally, those percentages and the coverage that we will see, how much of the moon will cover the sun in Flint, we're looking at 96.4% coverage, and that maximum coverage time is going to happen at 3:13 in the afternoon on Monday. And Saginaw, just because of that latitude, you can see it's a little bit less coverage, but not by much, 95%. Just think, that's only 5% of your sunlight that's coming out. At the same time, still at 3:15 into the afternoon, and we're still going to hold 3:15 there in Houghton Lake. But the coverage being a little bit further north, you're going to find that sitting at about 91.5%. So that's going to be really close to that 90% line, and then we'll head off into those 80s. As far as the eclipse itself, that was just looking at our maximum coverage here in mid-Michigan, but the whole event is going to take place through the afternoon. So if you want to start to see that moon coming across, because it's going to eat away at the sun, and you are going to find in Flint that even Flint, Saginaw, and Houghton Lake, matters of seconds is going to be the difference of when we see this starting, but about 1:57 in the afternoon is when you're going to want to head outside, grab the lawn chair, and just enjoy. And then that's going to last all the way into the afternoon, and it doesn't seem very long until the party is going to be done, because at 4:26 for both Flint and Houghton Lake is when we're going to have that wrapping up. 4:27 in Saginaw. So we are going to find that the eclipse, it's going to take place all during the afternoon, but we are going to find those conditions hopefully to be a little bit more favorable. Now, Kyle, it doesn't seem like we're going to have totality here, which
Right.
some people may say, oh, I want to see the full thing. Like, we're traveling, we want
Right.
to see the darkness.
Yeah.
And of course, we'll talk about what people can expect here, because
Sure.
I don't plan on being disappointed in mid-Michigan.
Right. And, you know, when it comes to percentages, right, 97% is a lot of 100, right? That's just simply how it works. But, you know, even though we are seeing only 5% of the sun's light at that point, even in Houghton Lake, what you have to think about is it's still the light of the sun. So that's still a lot of brightness. So the path of totality, where you're in 100% of the sun's light being blocked out, is significant compared to even 99%. So if you really want to see, and we have more on this in a moment, but if you really want to see that ring and all of that sunlight being blocked out, you have to be in 100, not 99, you have to be in 100. And of course that begs the question, now that we're not in that 100% path, you got to get to that 100% path, and travel is a big concern for this.
It is, and I know government agencies have been planning for this eclipse since the last eclipse across much of the United States, which was back in 2017. So they're taking information from that, and they are putting together plans for this one. So we are going to turn it back over to First Alert meteorologist Matthew Mondro for a look at what you can expect if you want to head towards the path of totality.
As we look ahead to the total solar eclipse this upcoming Monday, April 8th, we are expecting some travel impacts, especially farther south in Michigan and into Toledo. So we have totality that'll actually be crossing right over Toledo. So this is one of the areas closest to mid-Michigan that we will have totality. So it's actually not too far of a drive here from Flint. It's actually only a little bit less than a 2-hour drive down to this area. But if you will be traveling down there, we do expect that to take longer than 2 hours, just because of the volume of people that will especially be traveling from say Ann Arbor and Metro Detroit, a lot of southeastern Michigan here to Toledo, just because it is so close. So again, totality going right across Toledo there. We expect some backups on 23, also on 75 if you're heading down into that area. This is more so just an idea of how that traffic map is expected to look around Toledo if you will be heading down there. So again, a lot of heavy southbound traffic. Definitely be prepared for some longer drive times and wait times there too. It'd be a good idea to fill up your car ahead of time too. So if you will be traveling down, say to the state line or right around Toledo, you'd be better off filling up actually right around Ann Arbor or Dundee, possibly around Monroe as well before you get to Toledo, because there's going to be a lot more people in that area there locally right under totality. And it'd be a good idea to maybe bring your own snacks or water as well. Maybe pack a cooler with some snacks in it, just because if there is, or if you do encounter any long delays, we are expecting you to have to use some of those snacks and that water too. And also with the amount of people heading down there, some areas like Toledo could see their population going up right around 3 or 4 times what it normally is just for the day of the eclipse. So there is a chance that some restaurants actually may end up running short on some food as well. Good idea also to bring your chargers or any portable power points or batteries with you, just to keep those devices nice and charged up. One little caveat to that though is that we are expecting cell service to actually be a little bit diminished during that time frame. It's more so just because of the amount of people. Just want to make it clear, any diminishing cell service there, not because of the eclipse or because of any sort of blockage of signal from the moon. moon. It's just because of the amount of people there that's going to be using up a lot of that bandwidth. Again, congestion though, for our example that we have for Toledo, expecting a lot of people to be heading down into that area, potentially tens of thousands of people, a lot of them coming from southeastern Michigan just because it is so close. So that's where we're expecting a lot of congestion on those roadways and longer delays. And also for the restaurants there, unless restaurants are able to perhaps overstock a little bit ahead of the eclipse, there is that chance that some restaurants may run short on food simply just because of the amount of people and because of that increased demand as well. So that's why we're recommending you at least pack a cooler or maybe bring a bag of snacks and some bottled water with you if you're heading down there. But if you are heading down towards the Toledo area to see the eclipse, first we wish you good luck. We hope to see plenty of cool pictures. That is certainly going to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
That's a really good point. There's going to be a lot of pictures. And also, if you have the TV5 First Alert weather app or the news app, you can submit your solar eclipse photos, even if it's here in mid-Michigan. You don't have to be in totality. I want to see them all.
Right. One of the cool things is, because we know where the moon's going to be when it crosses over the sun, it's interesting to see with distance what it looks like from different perspectives, even if you're not in 100% totality.
Yes. I think all these pictures are, one, going to be worth 1,000 words, like the normal saying is going to be, but also good memories from it. Also, yes, I'm going to be taking pictures, but I'm going to be in the moment too. You're going to be living in the moment, right?
Oh, yeah. I have had this whole elaborate plan for everything set up with the camera. I'm probably going to just forget about most of it. I've had the plan to do 1:30 of just photos, and then the rest of it I'll spend with the eclipse. We'll see how long that lasts for, because this will be my first eclipse. I've seen partial eclipses in the past. I've never been in totality, so I think I'm just going to be totally distracted, and that's okay.
I think this is a fair experience to be distracted on. But we still have much more coming up. We're going to be talking with someone from the planetarium locally, and we're going to be talking about pets and what it's going to look like here. You still have the forecast.
Yeah, so we got to talk about what's the best ways to view it and where you're going to be able to view it with that weather. That's all coming up here in just a few minutes.
Michigan throws at you. Whether it's a tune-up or a complete replacement, Custom Engineering Heating and Cooling is your local solution, providing customized comfort and engineering excellence for over 40 years. Your local heating and cooling solution.
Right now, you can help provide 2 times the nights of emergency shelter during our Spring Matching Gift Challenge. Thanks to the power of this matching challenge, each gift will provide twice as many meals, nights of shelter, and compassionate, Christ-centered care for our struggling neighbors. Please give while your gift is doubled. Your gift will give our most vulnerable neighbors the best chance at a new life. To give, scan the QR code on the screen or go to rescuemidmichigan.org.
We apologize for those technical issues here, still working out some of those audio things. Thankfully, though, during the eclipse, I'm sure the animals will not disappoint on the audio side of things. So, though it may be something that you think is just visual, that is going to be something to also keep an ear out for.
Right, yeah. If you're in the path of totality, everything is going to think that it's becoming night. Street lights will turn on. If you've got those small solar paneled lights on your sidewalk in your yard, those will probably turn on. Birds that are typically chirping throughout the day, they'll go silent. You might have, crickets and stuff start to pick up because they think it's becoming night. So that's going to be one of the kind of audio things, or other than the sun and moon aligning, there's going to be lots of other things happening around you.
And First Alert Chief Meteorologist Chris Eastlick, he was getting a lot of questions on social media. And again, if you have more, hopefully we can address them here in the show, but you can still comment Facebook, YouTube. We're going to go over those questions here once we go through all of the hard work that we've put together to make this show possible for you. So hopefully we can get to those questions for you. But again, Chris may have the answers to those, so we're going to turn it over to him.
All right, Chief Meteorologist Chris Eastlick here with Patrick Ross, who is the planetarium manager at the Sloan Museum in Flint. Patrick, thanks for joining us today. Looking forward to the eclipse.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the questions that I was asked sort of initially is there's a lot of buzz about this eclipse. Is there any reason that this eclipse is more significant?
This eclipse is definitely more significant for us in Michigan because we are so close to the line of totality. The eclipse back in 2017, if you wanted to truly experience the eclipse, you had to travel to the path of totality, which for most people in Michigan meant a significant drive and taking a significant amount of time of work off, taking the kids. It was a lot more work to be able to experience a good part of the eclipse.
What can we expect here in mid-Michigan compared to those that are under totality? It might not seem like a huge difference from 100% to 97, but what can we expect?
Yes. So as far as expectations go, the excellent news when we are talking about the eclipse is that since we are so close to the path of totality, that everything leading up to totality and everything after totality is going to be essentially the same as if we were along the path. Now, to give you a little more insight, totality itself, when the moon is completely covering the sun, that only lasts around 4 minutes, depending on exactly where you are in that path. So the main difference between being in the path of totality and being at about 98% of totality is going to be those very special 4 minutes when you are actually able to take off your eclipse glasses and you're able to view the eclipse with your own eyes, right? There'll be a few special events that are happening at that time. You'll definitely be able to feel a change in the temperature along the path of totality. It will get dark enough that you can see some of the brighter stars and the planets, and the wildlife usually tends to go a little bit nuts during that time.
How do the wildlife react during something like this? Maybe not specifics, but do they sort of go, what's going on around us?
Yes, they get very excited. They are not used to having such a sharp change between day and night. So usually the birds start to chatter quite a bit. Dogs get a little bit freaked out with the eclipse. They might start barking as well. And you can tell during that time that all of nature is understanding that something different is happening for those 4 minutes.
For us during those 4 minutes, I'm guessing things will get dim, but how dim are we talking? If you can even put that in perspective, will it look almost like dusk or a little bit better than that?
It won't get dark enough to be able to see it looks like dusk or dawn. You'll be able to notice there will be a change in the light. Even though we're at 98%, 94% up in Saginaw, we still have to wear our glasses. So as you're trying to adjust to the change in brightness, one of the reasons we don't notice the change as much is because most likely we're going to have our glasses on, right? We're going to be viewing the eclipse, and that sort of messes with our eyes because we're looking through the glasses, that we're not sensitive to those subtle changes in lighting that are going to occur.
Would this almost be the difference between like a different shade of light bulb where you have like a daylight light bulb and then maybe a soft daylight light bulb where it's still light, but you might be able to just notice a subtle difference?
Right. That's a really good analogy. Another one would be a sort of wispy cloud passing over the sun, right? You can tell as you're sitting there that something has changed up in the sky. Usually we associate it with the cloud. It'll be similar to that. So it'll still be daylight, but yes, you can absolutely tell the difference.
If the weather is cloudy that day, does that mean we are totally out of luck, or are we still able to enjoy at least parts of it?
Partial eclipse is better than seeing no eclipse. So if you notice that the cloud line, the clouds dissipate, especially north of us when you're heading away from the traffic, it's worth taking that drive out to go see the eclipse. If you don't have that opportunity, or if we are completely clouded out, if we have dark storm clouds, like we're having active rain or thunderstorms, it's going to be very difficult to see the eclipse even through the clouds. But if we have a mildly cloudy day, it's worth going out with the eclipse glasses and just sort of gazing up into the area where you believe the sun should be, because oftentimes you can see it through the clouds. You won't be able to see the detail, but honestly, with the eclipse glasses, we're not looking so much for the detail as just the general shape of the eclipse happening.
As eclipses have happened over the years, have we ever made any significant scientific discovery as an eclipse has happened?
So, I mean, absolutely. One of the best discoveries that was made from an eclipse was actually confirmation of Einstein's theory of general relativity. Essentially, in a nutshell, a very small nutshell, the general theory of relativity states that massive objects are going to bend space-time. We can see this in some of the new images released by James Webb Space Telescope. But back in 1919 was when they were first able to actually prove this during an eclipse, because we knew where the sun was going to be. We knew where the stars were supposed to be behind the sun. And during that moment of totality, many scientists had gone out with telescopes along the path of totality, not to look at the eclipse, but to look next to the eclipse to see if the stars were where they were mapped to be, or where Einstein would predict they would appear due to that gravitational bend. And as I'm sure we most know, the theory was proven correct. They did see that gravitational warping. So that is probably the most famous example of science coming out of an eclipse. On a slightly funner note, there's also what we call Baily's beads. And if we think of the moon passing in front of the sun, again, we look up into the sky and it looks, round. But of course, it has hills and mountains on it. And so as the moon is crossing that in front of the sun, you actually start to get some very bright points that can show up as the sun is peering through or around those mountains. That is another one, especially for people who are doing photography of the eclipse. They're always trying to get those Baily's beads. So that was something, if someone sat down and tried to figure out what an eclipse would look like, it'd probably be figured out, but it was definitely something that, back in the day, someone was looking through the eclipse and was like, hey, the mountains are actually visible and the effect from the mountains are visible during the eclipse.
Super cool. The mountains and the hills. The terrain of the moon, a lot of us, we can't see that on a normal night just because it's not really illuminated for us and so forth. But the moon, of course, is going to put on a show. The sun is kind of the main star, pun intended here. But what about solar flares?
Yeah, so what's interesting about the sun, and we can't see this just because of the amount of light that the sun is always putting out. So we can never really see what's happening on the surface of the sun without special imagery. But when you take the moon and you put it in front of the sun, you've now blocked out all of the sun's light. You can actually see all the things that are happening on the surface of the sun, and that includes things like solar flares, that includes things like prominences, and all of these different things that are happening. So essentially, the sun is magnetically bound plasma together and all kinds of fancy stuff, kind of like the last story we just had there. You got into some deep stuff there. So
but that was super cool.
Exactly, and we get to see all these things, and one of those is going to be solar flares. So if we happen to see a solar flare or a prominence or something erupting on the surface of the sun, if it goes off to the sides, we'll be able to see it extend out. And that's only going to be the case because the moon has blocked out the light of the sun. We can see all the other things happening on the edge of the sun. It really is remarkable.
It is. And so let's talk about safety here, because this is very important. There may be some myths that are out there. There may be some confusion on safe viewing. So let's talk first things first, the safety tips. So I think this can go without saying. I think a lot of us already just kind of naturally know this. Do not look directly at the sun.
Right.
It's hard when you're driving. We all know that. So do not go out there with no eye protection at all. That is not advised. That's not okay. That's not healthy. So do not look directly at the sun. Also, if you think, oh, I'm just going to wear my sunglasses and I'm going to be fine. No.
Nope.
No, you're not going to be fine. They just don't, they're not dark enough. They don't add enough protection. They are not able to block all that UV that the sun is putting out. So sunglasses are not going to be okay.
Yeah, so the important thing to remember here, right, and the reason that we have the glasses is because on any given day, we typically don't purposely stare at the sun for an extended period of time, right? So we have these because they block out almost all of the sun's light. If you buy some of these glasses, you should be able to put them up to your eyes and see nothing. It should be totally black, okay? And the point of having these eclipse glasses is to block out that sun's light, because now we're purposely staring at the sun. There is nothing that's coming out of the sun that's different than any other day, right? We're just not purposely looking directly at the sun for, minutes on end or even longer if you're in the path of totality. So, the point of these is to protect your eyes, because we are purposely looking at the sun, which we don't typically do.
And it's not healthy. Obviously, it can cause blindness. It's not going to give you extra vitamin D. That's not okay either.
Yeah, there's a lot of theories out there.
Because, I know there's a lot. I've been seeing them on social media. So just making sure, have the glasses on if you're going to be doing safe viewing. Some of the interesting things to look for in your glasses is make sure that they're shiny and reflective. You can kind of see mine. They look a little bit like foil there, so you want that shiny edge. You're also going to want your edges here, make sure that they are flat, because if they are rounded, they could be ones that are not actually proper. And then the other thing to check for in your glasses is to make sure the certification logo's here. It's kind of hard to see just because of all the studio lights that we have, but it should look like a little globe. It'll have the letters I, S, and O. And then also you want to see ISO 12312-2. That's the certification and the requirements, meaning that they are dark enough for you. So make sure that you're checking, buy them from good sources. If you're buying them from some of the craft ones that could be homemade, they may not be safe and they may not be certified. So you're going to want to make sure that they do have that certification, and also just check, make sure that logo is firmly on there. You don't want to be able to see maybe a transparent edge where somebody put that logo on there either.
So, you know, this is just cardboard, right? And so it's very easy to find this logo on the internet and just stick it on there if I'm trying to sell fake glasses just to make some money. So taking those extra precautions, looking at the lenses, and again, when you put these on, I don't see anything through the lenses whatsoever. I can't see you. I might not be looking at you. I'm not sure because it's supposed to be blocking out all of the sun's light. So it's very important. I mean, you're welcome to buy the wrong glasses. It's not going to end up well. So
yes, it's very dangerous. And you brought up a good point. If you put your glasses on before and you can even see room lights coming in,
should be no light.
You should see no light at all. So that means that there's maybe a scratch that is on your glasses. As far as the glasses from 2017, I've seen some mixed reports on whether those are okay or not okay. The glasses do expire at a certain point. And they're $2, maybe $1 at a lot of places. I think that's a worthwhile investment, $2
Absolutely.
glasses.
And another thing about 2017 glasses, if you set them in a box for a few years and things rub around on them, you could get scratches in them that could ruin the foil that sits in the lenses, and you don't want any sunlight to make it through it all. So it's a good idea just to get new ones and make sure that they are the correct ones, the ones that are approved, because you know, a few minutes of sunlight would not do well for your eyeballs.
Right, and we want everybody to have a good time. This is supposed to be fun, and of course you probably heard, oh, you'll go blind. Just be smart. Just be safe about it. We want, like I said, everybody to have fun. And then we talked about taking pictures. We'll talk about looking ways indirectly, but I have my solar filter. You have your solar filters. Kyle, why should we have filters for our phones and our cameras?
Yeah, so again, you're going to want a filter for your eyeballs, which are the solar glasses, but you also want to have a filter for your cameras. And so essentially what we could see happen here is essentially we could end up at a point where we are getting sunlight through the lens, but it's a lens, it's glass, so it's magnifying that light through perhaps a mirror or to a sensor, and it'll actually fry the inside of your camera lens or the inside of your binoculars or your telescope. So you want to protect whatever your equipment is, but also, unless you have a mirrorless camera, when you go down to the eyepiece, it's also magnifying that right into your eye. So not only are you protecting your equipment with the correct filter, but you're also going to be protecting your eyes if you go down to the eyepiece. The filters vary, but as long as you have 16.5 stops worth of stop on your filter, if you're a camera person, you'll know what that means. It's essentially the same thing as making sure you have the right kind of level of blockage on your Eclipse glasses, then they should be safe for viewing through the camera.
Yes, and another thing to point out is welding shields. We'll talk about that here, but before we get into that segment, make sure you have the correct shade. I believe 14 is the correct one, so make sure you're double checking to make sure that that is dark. If you do plan on using that, if you have anything like, don't even try it. Again, $2 glasses, that's a pretty easy, safe, and cheap way to enjoy them.
And we've seen them at Walmart and Meijer. They're pretty much, pretty simple sources that you can find
to grab.
So,
But if you don't want to look directly, there are ways to indirectly look at the solar eclipse. So we're going to bring Patrick back and take a look at some ways that you can watch this another way.
There's ways that range from very low tech, easy to do, all the way up to things that tend to be a little bit more expensive. Starting on the expensive side, again, if you have binoculars or a telescope, a certified solar filter will work just fine. As far as the glasses go, there is down in the corner along the edge, there is a certification that you can look for. Welder's glasses can be dim enough to view the eclipse at a certain rating. And I will fully say I don't know exactly what that rating is, but if you have welder's glasses, there are resources available online to see if your welder's mask is enough to view the eclipse. working our way down towards the cheaper options, there is a pinhole projector. The easiest way, you go outside, take a note card, put a thumbtack through it. As the sun shines through the hole in the thumbtack, right, you'll get the eclipse projected down, usually onto the sidewalk or wherever you're pointing it. You can also make pinhole projectors that cover your head. You can get an old Chewy box or other Amazon box, do the similar thing, put a pinhole in it. You don't want to look through the pinhole, right? You're going to let the sun shine through the pinhole onto the opposite side of the box, and then you can view the eclipse. That one, while it doesn't look the best visually from the outside, on the inside, you do have a nice dark environment to view the eclipse. And if you have none of that, try to find some place that has patio furniture, right? Any of that sort of latticed patio furniture, any place that is going to cause a small shadow, you'll notice, and I recommend everyone keep an eye out for this. Anywhere you see shadows that are small, you will see that they're actually mimicking the shape of the sun. We take it for granted because normally with the sun being spherical, we get that round shadow and it sort of blurs together. But once you get that eclipse going, you can actually see it all over the place.
Interesting. You had brought up earlier when we were talking that you saw it in a puddle.
Yeah, so the
2017
one, right? We weren't in the path of totality, so I don't count it as seeing a total solar eclipse. But we did have some rain that moved through, and I was down in Jackson at the time, and so it left a puddle in the driveway. And then as the eclipse was occurring, there was a reflection of it in the puddle. So when we talk about the forecast here in a couple minutes, we do potentially have some rain before the eclipse happens, and so perhaps you'll have some puddles that you could potentially look in as well.
Yeah, so something to keep an eye out on that day. But we're going to take another quick break. We're going to be talking about the forecast. We are still going to be answering your questions and seeing how excited you are for the eclipse. And we're also going to make sure that you know when the next total solar eclipse is going to be. So all of that is still coming up. Don't go anywhere.
One 1-800-LEAVE-FREE. I'll be right there.
Riverfront Eye Care is your trusted local optometry practice in Flint and Saginaw. We're committed to providing expert care for your eyes, offering a wide range of services to meet all your eye care needs. From eye exams to contacts to glasses, we're here for you every step of the way. We prioritize your eye health, treating a variety of eye problems and providing eye care for all ages. Discover the difference at Riverfront Eye Care. Call to make an appointment or visit us online.
All right. So, of course, the forecast is going to take a lot of work. We're still working hard back here because there's still the short-term data that is yet to come in. And I'm sure there's going to be some changes, of course, going with the forecast. And then you can also fill us in on how the solar eclipse is going to affect our local weather too.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things in the weather department that are very important to the eclipse. Number one, it's what are the clouds going to look like?
That's the number one question we all want to know. And
they're super finicky, right? Where the clouds are going to end up, how long they might stick around, how thick they'll be, how much of that sun can we still see, down through the clouds. So there's a lot happening there. But also, how does the eclipse affect our weather? Because we have the sun during the day. The sun is essentially gone for several minutes. So how does that affect the weather? Well, we've got some weather to talk about here, and we'll talk about across the country. And what we're going to start with here, let's take a zoom out. Let's start initially with the storm systems that we have moving through, and essentially, and that black line there that stretches across the country, that's the path of totality. We have a few players to talk about. Number one, you can see the two low pressure systems, one just off the east coast, another one off into the Rockies there, and then our friend the Big Blue H, that's high pressure. Remember that high pressure brings us the calmer, clear, quieter conditions. So this is right now, as we go into this weekend here, essentially what we're going to be watching for is all of these storm systems to slowly shift to the east. And here's Saturday evening. It's too bad the eclipse wasn't happening here because that high pressure system sitting right over the state would do wonders for us for viewing the eclipse. But what we are going to see happen, and we'll be kind of threading the needle here between these storm systems as we go into Sunday. That high pressure system drifts off to the north and east. That's really going to be setting up some decent conditions for the Northeast, especially the farther northeast you go, places like Maine and New Brunswick. But here in Michigan, Notice that Sunday evening, we've got some clouds over the area. We also have some rain moving in from the south and west. So there's that rain chance for maybe leaving a few puddles behind. But this rain will be moving through as we go into Sunday evening, and then as we go into your Sunday night, and then potentially lingering into Monday morning. Now, exactly how long this rain sticks around is still a little bit in question. We're going to monitor how much dry air we have, how much moisture we're going to be able to work in. So there's still some questions there. But right now, it does look like that rain does move out of mid-Michigan as we go into Monday afternoon. So this right here is eclipse time. This is 3 p.m. on Monday. Notice high pressure system now off into Maine there. That's where the better chance of purely clear skies will be. You'll notice the rest of the country struggling with this storm system that's moving through. Of course, we couldn't have it any other way, right? It always has to be something, and it's going to be this low pressure system here. What we're going to be keeping an eye on is the chance for some dry air to potentially wrap around this storm system and drift into mid-Michigan. So what we typically see happen with these low pressure systems is they drag air from the west, that's usually cooler and drier, and they wrap it around. So we're potentially going to be looking at that. And if this lines up kind of how it looks right now, this could be good news for us. Perhaps not for perfectly clear skies, but at least for some sunshine. So here's how that looks. Just looking at the cloud cover now, again, across the country. We want to kind of pause here and talk about something else as well. Notice that there's clouds all over the place here on this map. What this map shows us is where there might be clouds, but not how thick those clouds will be, and that's very important. We'll zoom it in a little bit more here, and you'll notice that much of the path of totality, there are clouds here, and we might have only perhaps some mixed clouds here in mid-Michigan. But let's take one more step back here, and what we want to talk about are the types of clouds, because this is going to be very important for us, and what we're going to be most likely seeing for probably much of the Midwest, particularly here in Michigan, probably in western Ohio, parts of Indiana, down into Missouri, into Arkansas. Most of those areas will probably be looking at some form of cirrus cloud. Now, cirrus, they're high level, they're very wispy, okay? The big thing about cirrus is that they're very thin, and they're made of ice crystals, which allow much more light to pass through than some of your lower clouds. Take stratus or stratocumulus, for example. That's typically what brings us the boring, gray, terrible skies throughout much of the winter. So when we're looking at what our clouds are going to be like, sure, we might have some clouds over these areas, but more than likely they're going to be the cirrus or cirrostratus clouds, which allow that sunlight to come down through. And that's going to be huge for us because sure, it might not be perfectly clear skies. They might be a little milky, but at least we are looking at the sunlight making its way through, and we'll be able to see the eclipse through those clouds.
And like Patrick had said earlier, seeing even a partial eclipse is better than no eclipse at all.
Yes.
So as long as we don't have those rain clouds that are thick and it's hard to see through them, if we have to have clouds, as meteorologists, we want to see cirrus clouds on that day. So that's something to watch. Those look like cotton candy, or like if you pull a cotton ball together. So if you're outside looking on Monday, look for cotton candy. Look for strung out cotton balls.
Yes, and that's really the best news here for us, other than it being totally clear. So one of the things we're going to watch for as we move forward in these forecasts, you might see that we have clouds, in the forecast, especially if you look at maps that will probably air throughout the next couple days on TV. It might look like that we have some clouds in, but remember, those maps don't tell us exactly what type of clouds they are or how thick the clouds are. So more than likely, we will be looking at those thinner cirrus clouds, or at least a mix between, maybe some thicker clouds, but more than likely that cirrus, which is not the best news, but it's good news.
I was going to say, that is still good news to me. And if for some strange reason the thick clouds do roll in, there's going to be more eclipses coming.
Yes.
So another check-in, Matthew, he's here. He's going to tell us when we can see our next eclipse, and even some previous ones, just in case you think you've caught one before.
Yes.
As we look ahead to the Great American Eclipse coming up on this Monday, April 8th, let's wind back the clock a little bit, too, talk about some of our previous eclipses. Now, this one actually fairly recent. You may remember this, August 21st, 2017, so just about 7 years ago. This eclipse was here during the afternoon. Totality at its maximum was around 2 hours and 40 minutes. That was over in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, a little bit to our south. But even here in mid-Michigan, we had around 80 to 85% coverage. Personally, I actually remember this eclipse, too. I was at my orientation at Central Michigan Michigan University that day, and everyone was outside too. It was a very nice day, and I remember skies at least getting dimmer. It wasn't completely dark, but still you did notice that eclipse was there. So that one more so in recent memory back in 2017 on August 21st. Now winding back even farther though, this is February 26, 1979. Totality was over the U.S. only for about 40 minutes. This came in off of the west coast right around Washington and Oregon, went up through Idaho, Montana, and North Dakota, but then turned farther north up into Canada. That was partially just the time of day, also the time of year with that eclipse being in February. That had about 80 to 85% coverage here in mid-Michigan. Again, that eclipse back in 1979. Earlier in that decade, though, March 7th, 1970, totality only over the U.S. for about 20 minutes. This went through Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, and right around Virginia as well. Here in mid-Michigan, we only had around 70 to 75% coverage of that eclipse. So that one was definitely a little bit farther south into our area. Looking ahead here into some of our next solar eclipses, though, you may notice some of those patterns at least being just a little bit similar. So on August 12th, 2045, we have another total solar eclipse that goes from the west coast to the east coast, ending down in Florida. This path very similar to the 2017 path, however, just shifted a little bit farther south. It's partially due to the time of year, August 12th. That's right around the same time of year as the 2017 eclipse. Here in mid-Michigan, we'll be right around 65 to 70% coverage with that eclipse. Now we have March 30th, 2052. This one similar to that 1970 eclipse where it was very far southeast in the United States. Here in mid-Michigan, we're only going to have around 65 to 70% coverage for that eclipse as we go towards May 11th, 2078. That eclipse during the early to mid-afternoon. And that one actually also fairly similar to the one just before that in 2052, where it's a little bit farther southeast into the U.S. Here in Flint and Saginaw, right around 70 to 75% coverage. If we wait a little bit longer, though, to September 14th, 2099, just for reference, I'll be 100 years old when this eclipse happens. We actually do have totality with this one that'll go over parts of Michigan. So Grand Rapids is included within that, as well as Kalamazoo, Battle Creek, and Jackson. Lansing will be right on the edge of that totality. But think about it. If you're in Flint at this time, you really only have to drive to around Lansing or just farther south than Lansing to be in the totality of that eclipse. So again, September 14th, 2099, any babies born this year would be 75 years old when this eclipse happens too. So still quite a ways away from us, but it is pretty cool that we'll eventually have that eclipse going right over the lower peninsula. As you look ahead to the eclipse this upcoming Monday, though, if you are traveling down, say, into Ohio, where there will be totality, we wish you luck, and we hope to see plenty of cool pictures from you.
Okay, so 2099. I am going to be really old.
Yep.
I'll be over 100 years old at that point.
Yep.
So I'm going to have to wait a while for that one. But hey, the train, the boat, the car, they
Whatever
can get me to the next one, the plane.
Yeah, and you know, that's just the total solar eclipses, right? There's also the annular eclipses, that's also partial eclipses in there, as well as the lunar eclipses. So there's also other possibilities, like I believe it's 2048, there's an annular eclipse that goes right over the Mackinac Bridge. So we do still have, you know, other opportunities for neat sun and moon things that'll be happening.
Yes.
You know, the total solar eclipses, they're far more difficult. You know, we're trying to line the moon and the sun up here, so it's not the easiest to do, but it certainly is exciting. And the nice thing about this one is that it is close to home. And again, if you want to see, you know, it's the totality, like everything that you would expect during a you know, total solar eclipse, you just got to be in the middle of it. And essentially this is what that looks like for us. Again, the total solar eclipse, you block out essentially all of the light of the sun. But the annular eclipse, you kind of have this ring. So you don't block out all of it. It's still super cool, but it is slightly different. And then the partial eclipse is when we just are blocking out, you know, maybe a quarter or a half of the sun with the moon. So there's certainly different types of eclipses, and we'll have the opportunity to see many of these over the coming years, but the total solar eclipse is certainly a little more difficult to come by.
Yes, and I know some of you have had questions already coming through, and a lot of people have said the total solar eclipse are a little bit more rare. I know I was looking at some of my notes on how to get these eclipses to happen. So a total solar eclipse, we typically see those happen every 18 months. But the other thing to consider here is that or the eclipses happen, excuse me, every 18 months. But the thing to consider is not all of them happen over land. Right. Not all of them happen where we can see them. And the path can also suddenly stop because you have to have your moon, your sun, and the earth all perfectly aligned,
Yes.
and everything is on its own orbit. Earth is tilted. So there's a lot of elements that go in. So between the orbit, the speed, the size of the planets, their positions, scientists have a lot of calculations, and it's how they put all those calculations, very much like weather. We put all the data that we have the computers calculate all those equations, and that's how Matthew was able to go and look up to see when we would have that next eclipse close to Michigan in 2099. So that's how we're able to look that far ahead.
Yes, and even though it is outer space, it, funny enough, is simpler than trying to figure out where those clouds are going to be, just because, you know, we don't know where all those little particles are, and we can't measure them all like we can the moon. We know what that path is going to look like. We just got to kind of draw it out till they all match up with each other.
Yes, and so we have a couple questions here. Kristen asked about Midland. Their coverage is going to be very similar to what we have in Saginaw as far as that coverage, because as I pull up the map here, you are going to find, I'm going to let it play out, but as we kind of zoom in, Midland is going to be around that 94%, just because it's a little bit further north and west. So the angle and the coverage as you're being able to observe the sun and the moon coming into alignment there. So that's going to be something as far as that percentage is changing. So if you have friends, family across the state, and they're saying, hey, it's a little bit of a different number here, it's just because of your latitude and where you're going to be at.
And we've got another question here, kind of on the same note. 95% sounds pretty good to me. And you know, in the grand scheme of things, 95, 97, 96%, that is quite a bit. But one thing that we have to keep in mind here is that we're talking about the light of the sun, right, which is very, very powerful. Even 5% of that light is still a lot if we want to see everything else that's happening. So there's two ways to look at this, right? Number one, you're blocking out 95% of the light of the sun, so it will get pretty dark, and we will have, you know, certainly some very noticeable impacts here. But to really see that kind of that ring and everything coming off the side of the sun, you want to have that 100% totality. So 95 certainly is a lot. I mean, you really can't get much closer, right? So it certainly is going to be noticeable here in mid-Michigan, the impacts of the solar eclipse. And another thing is, and Diane actually just realized I forgot to mention this, the impact that the eclipse has on our weather, especially being in that 95% zone, right? We're suddenly blocking out the light of the sun during the middle of the afternoon when we're typically warming up the most, right? We warm up during the day because of the light of the sun. And so as we go through, you know, the afternoon and we're warming up, and then suddenly we stop that warm up, it'll get noticeably cooler. We could cool off by several degrees. Say that we had a forecast high of 60 degrees for that day, and then suddenly that moon comes over and blocks out the sun. We could lose 5 degrees, if not more, for some folks. And you know, if you've got those puffy kind of cauliflower-looking clouds during the afternoon, and that moon comes over and blocks out the sunlight, those will disappear because those are driven by the heat of the sun. So we could certainly have some impacts. Winds could calm down. There's all kinds of things that the weather could do in kind of relation to the eclipse.
Yeah, the eclipse is going to change a lot of things, from the weather to even how we behave, how our pets behave. Also, some of you were saying in here that you've made your own. Erica, she built her own viewer for the eclipse, so I think that's great.
Awesome.
This weekend, you can kind of test some of this stuff out because it's going to be sunny, so you can make sure that your glasses are in good working order, that your viewers are in good working order. Same rules apply on Saturday and Sunday as they do on Monday, and even afterwards. But we've actually answered a lot of questions. I do want to make sure that everybody has our app. This is going to be where we provide our updates. So I know a lot of you may be watching here on your phone, so it might be hard to scan that QR code. But if you are catching us later, make sure you have that. It's not only good for getting eclipse updates, but it's also really good for getting severe weather updates, as we're going to be headed into that season soon. So that's a really great tool. We've already had a lot of information coming out on the app. Even just the other night, I saw in the app that there's different chips and candies and all this fun stuff to commemorate the solar eclipse. So we are excited. I'm sure everybody is considering the buzz. There's going to be shirts for people who are going to totality to kind of see and kind of commemorate this big event. But It looks like we answered all of those questions,
Yeah.
Kyle. But of course, the top of the show, we had some audio issues. So I just want to replay to set the stage of how cool Monday's really going to be.
We're really proud.
The most epic event this spring is not on the silver screen.
The sky itself will be hosting its very own cosmic blockbuster.
And TV5's First Alert Weather Team is preparing you for the chance of a lifetime.
Mark your calendars, Mid-Michigan, for the Great American Eclipse Special.
And get equipped with essential tips to ensure you can enjoy the spectacle without any risk.
Join us for your ticket to an astronomic show you don't want to miss.
The Great American Eclipse, Friday afternoon at 2 on TV5 social media and digital platforms.
All right, if you do have any more questions, of course, you can connect with us on the TV5 First Alert Weather app. We'll also have this replay of this if you want to catch it later or tell your family and friends to catch up. Again, that's going to be on YouTube. You'll be able to recap this on Facebook. It's also going to be under the First Alert specials. If you have Fire TV or if you're on Roku and also Android TV, we've had our coverage there as well. And we are going to continue to have coverage as we go into the weekend and even into Monday. So, of course, we hope that everybody's safe, that you get those glasses, and that you have a good time.